Marcus Donnelly, or Mac as everyone called him, should have seen it coming. When your crew starts whispering every time you walk into a room, and the captain suddenly develops an interest in your personal toolkit, it's usually not because they're planning a surprise birthday party. But Mac had always been better with machines than people, which was probably why he was currently watching his ship disappear into the rust-colored sky of Kythara while standing in the middle of nowhere with nothing but a basic survival kit and a growing sense of cosmic injustice. "Well, this is fantastic," Mac muttered, adjusting the straps on his emergency pack. "Nothing says team building like good old-fashioned betrayal." The plan had been simple enough. Kythara was littered with ancient technology from a long-dead civilization, and salvage crews made decent money hauling the stuff back to civilized space. Mac had joined Captain Vex Thornwall's crew 6 months ago, bringing his engineering expertise and an uncanny ability to jury-rig solutions out of spare parts and sheer stubbornness. What he hadn't expected was for his modifications to work so well. See, Mac had a habit of tinkering. Give him a standard plasma cutter, and he'd somehow make it cut through twice as much material while using half the power. Hand him a basic scanner, and he'd boost its range by 300% using parts from a broken coffee maker. The rest of the crew thought it was just Mac being Mac. But what they didn't realize was that his enhanced tools were worth more than their entire ship. Captain Thornwall had figured it out first. Vex was the kind of man who could smell profit from 3 systems away, and he'd been watching Mac's work with increasing interest. Then came Navigator Pip Gearwright, a nervous little man who followed Vex around like a lost puppy, and finally Security Chief Brutus Hammerfist, who had the personality of a particularly dim brick but followed orders without question. The setup had been beautifully simple. They'd told Mac they'd detected some high-value salvage in a canyon about 50 kilometers from their landing site. Standard operating procedure was to split up and cover more ground, so Mac had headed out alone with his toolkit while the others supposedly went in different directions. Only they hadn't gone in different directions. They'd gone straight back to the ship, loaded up Mac's enhanced tools, and left him to contemplate his life choices under the twin suns of Kythara. Mac pulled out his basic communicator and tried raising the ship one more time. Static. Of course, he'd modified their communications array too, and apparently gratitude wasn't in his former crewmate's vocabulary. "Okay, Mac," he said to himself, "because talking to yourself was only crazy if you expected an answer. You've got water for 3 days, food for 5, and enough solar batteries to power your gear for maybe a week. The nearest settlement is 200 kilometers away, and this planet is supposedly crawling with hostile wildlife. How hard can it be?" That's when he heard the howling. The howling was getting closer, and Mac was starting to think his former crew might have done him a favor by making his death quick and inevitable rather than slow and agonizing. He'd heard stories about Kythara's native wildlife. Big, toothy stories with unhappy endings. The creatures that emerged from the rocky outcroppings around the canyon didn't look like anything Mac had expected. They were definitely wolf-like, but they walked upright and wore simple leather harnesses decorated with metal trinkets. The largest one, a gray and black specimen with intelligent golden eyes, approached Mac with what could generously be called caution. "You are the small pack human," the creature said in heavily accented but perfectly understandable standard. "Your packmates departed without you. This is curious." Mac blinked. "You speak standard?" "Many things we speak," the wolf being replied. "I am Fang Brightai, leader of the Eastwind Pack. This is Howl Tinkerpad, who collects the dead things that once lived." He gestured to a smaller, brown-furred creature who was staring at Mac's toolkit with obvious fascination. "Dead things that once lived?" Mac asked. "Machines," Howl Tinkerpad clarified, his voice higher and more excited than Fang's. "The not-alive things that the star people leave behind. They sing no more, but sometimes they remember how to sing if you know the right words." Mac looked at his basic toolkit, then at the obviously intelligent aliens who had been written off as primitive wildlife in every report he'd read. How long have you been able to talk to humans? Fang Brighteye's lips pulled back in what might have been a smile, revealing very impressive teeth. Always. But star people think we are simple beasts. Easier to watch and learn when they believe you cannot understand their words. Smart, Mac admitted. So you know my packmates left me here to die? Yes, very strange behavior for packmates. We would eat such packmates. Mac found himself oddly comforted by this straightforward approach to treachery. Yeah, well, humans are complicated. Howl Tinkerpad had crept closer and was now examining Mac's water purifier with the intensity of a scholar studying ancient texts. This sings very quietly, he said. But it sings of clean water and good things. How does it remember to sing? Mac looked at the basic purifier, then at the genuinely curious alien, then at his increasingly bizarre situation. You want to know how it works? Yes, very much yes. Mac knelt down and opened the purifier's maintenance panel. Okay, so you've got your basic filtration system here, but the real magic happens in the ionic exchange chamber. See this component? It's supposed to clean maybe 10 liters a day, but if you adjust the power flow like this. He made a quick modification using his multi-tool and rewrote the feedback loop through this secondary circuit there. The purifier's quiet hum became a satisfied purr, and the output indicator jumped from green to bright blue. Howl Tinkerpad's eyes went wide. You made the dead thing that once lived sing louder. You are a song bringer. I prefer engineer, but sure. Fang Brighteye studied Mac with new interest. Your packmates left you for the Void Runners to consume, yes? Curious. We would eat such packmates, he repeated, as if this was the most sensible response in the universe. Mac was starting to think the Kytharans might have a point. 3 weeks later, Mac was beginning to understand why his former crew had assumed he'd be dead by now. Not because of the Kytharans, who had turned out to be surprisingly good company, but because Pup Sparklaw was apparently determined to electrocute himself with every piece of technology he touched. No, 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 Mac said, gently prying a power cell away from the young Kytharan before he could lick it. We've talked about this. If it glows, don't put it in your mouth. Pup Sparklaw, who couldn't have been more than the equivalent of a human teenager, looked disappointed. But how else do you taste the lightning spirit? You don't taste the lightning spirit, Sparklaw. You measure it with instruments. Like this. Mac held up his multimeter, which had become something of a religious artifact among the pack. See? It tells us the lightning spirit is strong but not angry. Elderwise Ironbite, a grizzled old Kytharan who had been skeptical of Mac's presence from the beginning, snorted from his position by the workshop entrance. In my day, we knew the lightning spirit was angry when it killed us. These new methods are overcomplicated. These new methods keep us from getting killed, Mac pointed out, which I think we can all agree is a good thing. The workshop had started as a simple lean-to against a canyon wall. Now it was a sprawling complex of interconnected caves and salvage structures, filled with the accumulated technological detritus of a dozen different civilizations. The Kytharans, it turned out, had been collecting broken technology for generations, hoping someone would eventually show up who could make it work again. That someone apparently was Mac. Alpha engineer Howl Tinkerpad called from across the workshop, where he was carefully cleaning a piece of machinery that might have been a medical scanner or a food processor. The thing that sees inside things is making the angry noise again. Mac sighed and made his way over to the diagnostic station. The Kytharans had developed their own vocabulary for technology, which was actually more intuitive than most technical manuals. The thing that sees inside things was indeed making an angry noise, which meant someone had probably connected something to something else in a way that violated several laws of physics. Okay, who was working on this last? Mac asked. Guilty silence. I'm not angry, I just need to know what you did so I can fix it. I may have tried to make it see inside things faster, Sparklaw admitted. by adding more lightning spirit. How much more lightning spirit? All of it. Beh. Mac looked at the smoking remains of what had been a perfectly good medical scanner and reminded himself that patience was a virtue. Okay, new rule. Nobody adds lightning spirit to anything without asking me first. The lightning spirit is not like seasoning. More is not always better. Fang Bright Eye padded over, carrying a data pad covered in crude but surprisingly accurate technical diagrams. The young learn by breaking things, he said philosophically. It is the way of the pack. Yeah, well, some of these things are irreplaceable, Mac muttered, but he was already mentally cataloging what parts he could salvage from the scanner. This is why we guard the sacred tools, Howell Tinkerpad said reverently, gesturing toward a locked cabinet where Mac's basic toolkit was displayed like holy relics. The tools of the Alpha Engineer must be protected so that the song-bringing may continue. Mac still wasn't entirely comfortable with the religious overtones his arrival had apparently inspired, but he had to admit it was better than being left to die in a canyon. The Kytharans had elevated his basic tools to legendary status, with elaborate ceremonies for their care and maintenance. His sonic screwdriver had become the sacred driver of infinite turning, and his plasma welder was now the flame that joins all things. It was probably the most job security he'd ever had. 6 months after being marooned on Kythara, Mac had somehow become the most important person on the planet. Word had spread about the tool blessing Alpha and his miraculous ability to make dead technology sing again. Delegations arrived weekly from packs across the continent, carrying broken devices and desperate hope. The breakthrough had come when Mac successfully repaired an ancient terraforming device that had been sitting dormant for 3,000 years. The massive machine had been treated as a sacred monument by the local packs, but Mac had recognized the power coupling system and realized it just needed a good cleaning and some replacement parts he could fabricate from salvage. When the device hummed to life and began producing clean water and fertile soil, Mac's reputation went from impressive to mythical overnight. Alpha Engineer Fang Bright Eye announced, entering Mac's expanded workshop with the formal tone he used for official pack business. Pack leader Snarl Darkfang of the Northern Ridge has arrived to challenge your wisdom. Mac looked up from the quantum resonance generator he was rebuilding. Challenge my wisdom how exactly? He claims his pack's song-bringer is superior to you. He wishes to prove this through contest. Mac sighed. He'd been expecting something like this. Success bred challengers, and Snarl Darkfang had been making noise about Mac's growing influence for weeks. What kind of contest? Contest of tool blessing. Each song-bringer will attempt to awaken the same dead thing that once lived. The one who succeeds most completely will be acknowledged as the true Alpha Engineer. And if I refuse? Fang Bright Eye's ears flattened slightly. Snarl Darkfang is not known for accepting refusal gracefully. His pack is large and hungry. Mac set down his tools and stretched. Okay, let's get this over with. What's the target? The target turned out to be a massive orbital communications array that had crashed into the planet's surface centuries ago. The twisted wreckage was the size of a small building, and Mac could see at least a dozen different points of failure just from the outside. It was exactly the kind of challenge that would separate the genuine engineers from the lucky amateurs. Snarl Darkfang was an imposing figure, even by Kytharan standards. His pack had apparently been trying to repair the array for years, led by their own song-bringer, a nervous-looking creature called Whimper Smallgear. So Snarl rumbled, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had never met a problem he couldn't solve with teeth and claws. You are the human who thinks he can teach the star metal to sing again. I am the human who actually can teach the star metal to sing again, Mac replied. But hey, you're welcome to try first. Snarl's approach was exactly what Mac had expected. Lots of dramatic gestures, lots of power surges, and lots of sparks. Whimper Smallgear tried his best, but it was clear his training consisted mostly of hitting things with progressively larger hammers until they either worked or exploded. The array remained stubbornly silent. "Your turn, small pack human," Snarl sneered. Mac walked around the array once, twice, 3 times, his practiced eye cataloging the damage. Power coupling severed here. Data conduits corroded there. Main processing unit probably fried beyond repair. But the quantum entanglement communicator at the core looked intact, and if he could route around the damaged sections. "I'm going to need some help," Mac announced. "Howl Tinkerpad, Sparkclaw, Elder Ironbite, I need you to coordinate power routing while I work on the main array." What followed was a masterclass in collaborative engineering. Mac directed his pack with the precision of a conductor leading an orchestra, each member handling their assigned tasks with the expertise that came from months of training. They rerouted power, bypassed damaged systems, and jury-rigged solutions that would have made any engineering professor weep with joy or horror. The array came online with a harmonious hum that seemed to resonate through the ground itself. Suddenly the air was filled with voices, thousands of them, as the device connected to the galactic communications network for the first time in centuries. Snarl Darkfang stared at the functioning array, then at Mac, then at back the crowd of Kytharans who had gathered to watch the contest. "How?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Teamwork," Mac said simply, "and knowing when to listen to the machine instead of trying to force it to do what you want." The crowd erupted in howls of approval, and Mac realized he'd accidentally done something that went far beyond simple engineering. He'd demonstrated a completely different way of thinking about technology, one that emphasized understanding and cooperation over domination and force. Snarled Darkfang approached Mac slowly, his head lowered in what Mac was beginning to recognize as a gesture of respect. "You are truly the Alpha Engineer," he said. "My pack would be honored to learn from you." Mac looked around at the gathered Kytharans, all of them looking at him with a mixture of awe and expectation, and realized his life had taken a turn he never could have predicted. "I went from corporate drone to technological messiah," he muttered to himself. "My performance review would be interesting." The ship appeared on the horizon exactly 1 year after Mac had been abandoned, and he recognized the distinctive hull markings immediately. His former crew had returned to Kythara, probably expecting to find his bones bleached white by the twin suns. Instead, they found a thriving technological center with Mac at its heart, surrounded by hundreds of Kytharans who treated him like a combination of Einstein and a religious prophet. Mac was working on a new project, a planetary defense grid that would protect Kythara from unwanted visitors, when Fang Brightai approached with news of the ship's landing. "The pack abandoners have returned," Fang announced, his voice carrying the particular tone he used when discussing things that might need to be eaten. "They seek audience with the Alpha Engineer." Mac set down his tools and smiled. "Let them come. I've been looking forward to this conversation." Captain Vex Thornwall looked older than Mac remembered, with new lines around his eyes and a nervous twitch he'd developed since their last meeting. Navigator Pip Gearwright was practically vibrating with anxiety, and Security Chief Brutus Hammerfist kept looking around as if he expected to be ambushed at any moment. "Mac," Vex called out as they approached the great workshop. "Thank the stars you're alive. We've been searching for you everywhere." "Have you now?" Mac replied, not looking up from the device he was calibrating. "That's interesting, considering you left me in a canyon with nothing but a basic survival kit and a profound sense of betrayal." "There was a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," Mac interrupted, finally looking up. "You found out my tool modifications were worth more than your ship, so you decided to cut me out of the equation. Simple greed, really. I can respect that more than whatever lie you were about to tell." Vex's face cycled through several expressions before settling on desperate sincerity. "Look, we made a mistake. We came back to make it right. We're prepared to offer you a full partnership in the operation." "How generous," Mac said. considering I now own the most advanced technological center in this sector of space. That's when the rest of Mac's pack emerged from the workshop. 50 Kytharans, all of them trained in various aspects of engineering and technology, all of them regarding Mac's former crew with the sort of interest a chef might show toward potential ingredients. These are the Void Runners who abandoned pack mates, Howl Tinkerpad announced to the assembled crowd. They left our alpha engineer to die alone. The responding growl from the crowd was not what anyone would call friendly. Now let's not be hasty, Pip squeaked, backing up until he bumped into Brutus. Actually, let's be hasty, Mac said. You came here expecting to find my corpse and loot whatever was left. Instead, you found me alive, successful, and surrounded by friends who value loyalty over profit. I'd say that's pretty much perfect justice. Captain Vex looked around at the technological marvels scattered throughout the workshop, at the obviously advanced equipment Mac had built, and Mac could practically see the greed lights turning on in his eyes. Those tools you modified, Mac, we brought them back. All of them. Consider it a peace offering. Mac laughed, a sound with absolutely no humor in it. You brought back my basic toolkit? How thoughtful. Unfortunately, those tools are now about as useful as stone knives compared to what I've built here. To demonstrate his point, Mac picked up what looked like a simple handheld device and activated it. A holographic display appeared in the air, showing detailed schematics of the visitor's ship along with a complete analysis of its systems and weaknesses. Quantum resonance scanner, Mac explained casually. Range of approximately 50,000 kilometers, capable of analyzing any technology within line of sight. I built it last month using parts from a coffee maker and some components I found in a crashed probe. Vex's face went pale. Mac, we can work something out. A partnership. 50-50 split of all profits. You're not listening, Mac said patiently. I don't want your partnership. I don't want your ship. I don't want anything from you except for you to leave this planet and never come back. And if we refuse? Brutus asked, his hand moving toward his sidearm. The growling from the Kytharan crowd increased in volume, and Mac noticed several of his pack had positioned themselves strategically around the visitors. Fang Brightie stepped forward, his lips pulled back to reveal teeth that could probably bite through steel plating. If you refuse, Mac said quietly, then you'll discover that the Kytharans take a very dim view of people who abandon their pack mates. And they have very traditional ideas about justice. The standoff lasted exactly as long as it took for Captain Vex to realize he was outnumbered, outgunned, and out of options. Fine, he said. We'll leave. But this isn't over, Mac. Yes, it is, Mac replied. And if you ever come back here, I'll let my pack handle you according to their customs. Trust me, you don't want that. Mac watched his former crew retreat to their ship, their shoulders slumped in defeat. As the ship lifted off and disappeared into the sky, Howl Tinkerpad approached him. The pack abandoners flee like startled prey, he observed. This is good, but they will spread word of our alpha engineer across the stars. Others may come seeking to challenge you. Max smiled and picked up his tools. Let them come. I've got the best pack in the galaxy, and we're just getting started. 5 years after being abandoned on Kythara, Max stood in the center of the great workshop and marveled at what they'd built together. The single canyon facility had expanded into a network of interconnected technological centers that stretched across 3 continents. The Kytharans had proven to be natural engineers once someone took the time to actually teach them, and their combination of pack loyalty and technical curiosity had created something unprecedented in the galaxy. Alpha Engineer Fang Brightie announced, padding into the workshop with a data pad clutched in his claws. The Galactic Trade Commission has sent another delegation. They wish to establish formal trade relations with Kythara. Mac looked up from the advanced fabrication unit he was programming. What's their offer? Exclusive technology licensing in exchange for Kytharan resources. Standard colonial extraction agreement. Counteroffer, Mac said. They can trade with us as equals, or they can find someone else to exploit. We're not interested in being anyone's colony. It was the same response he'd given to a dozen different governments, corporations, and trade organizations over the past few years. Word had spread quickly about the lost human who had somehow turned a primitive planet into a technological powerhouse, and everyone wanted a piece of the action. What they didn't understand was that Mac had found something on Kythara that he'd never had among humans, a family that actually valued him for who he was rather than what he could produce for them. The delegation also brought this, Fang continued, handing Mac a sealed message cylinder. It bears the mark of the Terran Colonial Authority. Mac opened the message and read it twice, his expression growing more amused with each pass. It's a job offer, he announced to the workshop. Senior Chief Engineer position with the Terra Colonial Fleet. Competitive salary, full benefits, and a signing bonus of 500,000 credits. The assembled Kytharans looked at him expectantly. Howell Tinkerpad spoke first. Will you accept this offer, Alpha Engineer? Mac walked over to the workshop's fusion furnace and fed the message into the flames. I think we can use this for fuel, he said. Paper burns surprisingly well. The crowd erupted in approving howls, and Mac realized he'd probably just made another entry in the growing collection of stories about the Alpha Engineer who turned down the galaxy's most prestigious job offers. Pup Sparkclaw, now a skilled technician in his own right, approached with a freshly completed project. Alpha Engineer, I have successfully modified the communication array to include the new quantum entanglement protocols. The star voices should now sing more clearly across the void. Mac examined the work with a critical eye. Clean welds, proper power routing, elegant design solutions. Excellent work, Sparkclaw. I think you're ready for your own apprentices. The young Kytharan's eyes went wide with pride, and Mac felt the same satisfaction he'd experienced when he'd first successfully repaired that water purifier all those years ago. Teaching others to build and create was infinitely more rewarding than building things alone. Alpha Engineer, Elder Wise Ironbite approached, moving more slowly than he used to, but still sharp as a laser cutter. The sacred tools require their monthly blessing ceremony. The pack gathers to hear the stories of the first repairs. Mac nodded and made his way to the sacred tool shrine, where his original basic toolkit was displayed in a place of honor. The tools were no longer used for actual work, having been replaced by far more advanced equipment, but they remained symbols of the beginning of something extraordinary. As he performed the ritual maintenance on his old sonic screwdriver, Mac reflected on the strange turns his life had taken. He'd started as a corporate engineer, became a marooned castaway, evolved into a technological messiah, and finally found his place as the Alpha Engineer of an entire planet. The ceremony concluded with the traditional retelling of Mac's arrival on Kythara, a story that had grown considerably in the telling. In the current version, Mac had apparently arrived trailing fire from the sky, carrying the sacred tools and bringing the gift of song-making to the grateful Pax. And so, Fang Brightai concluded the story. The Alpha Engineer chose to remain with the pack that valued him, rather than return to the Void Runners who had abandoned him. For he had learned that the strongest pack is not the one that discards its members, but the one that treasures them. Mac looked around at the faces of his pack, dozens of Kytharans who had become his friends, students, and family. Turns out the wolves were better company than humans all along, he said quietly. Who knew? As the ceremony concluded and the pack dispersed to their various projects, Mac remained in the workshop, surrounded by the tools and technology that had become his life's work. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new visitors wanting to exploit Kythara's resources, and new opportunities to prove that cooperation was stronger than competition. But tonight he was exactly where he belonged, among the pack that had found him when he was lost, valued him when he was worthless, and made him their alpha when he had nowhere else to go. The tools might be legendary, but the real treasure was the family he'd found among the stars.